and a very warm and a very special welcome to all of you. It's a very special evening. The C.K. Prahalad Annual Memorial Lecture 2012. It's special also because of very special people. Gayatri and Deepa Prahalad, thank you very much for being here. My mentor, my guru, Mr. Tarun Das, the founding trustee of the Aspen Institute in India. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, a leader by thought, by deed, by action. Dr. C.K. Prahalad, or C.K. as he was known to some of us, was a thinker, a teacher, a visionary, passionate in his belief of India's inherent potential and its chosen destiny. He strongly felt that a country with 1 billion people should not look outward for best practices, but innovate next practices. He also demonstrated his belief that innovation should focus on those at the bottom of the pyramid. In one of his columns in the Harvard Business Review, he had concluded, executives are constrained not by resources, but by their imagination. As corporate citizens, we are expected to imagine, innovate, and succeed with the resources at our disposal. We create value that trickles down to levels that we are not sometimes aware of. It is therefore necessary that we never cease to imagine of better, of more efficient ways of doing business, of means to work around the limitation of resources, and of how we can create more value for all our stakeholders. The first ever Aspen program on value-based leadership in the mid-90s was in Goa, and it had Gopal as a participant. Gopal's association with Aspen is very long. It took several years after that to set up Aspen India in 2004, promoted by CII, but as an independent institution. Since last year, Kiran Pasricha, who spent 25 years with CII, took over as the CEO and has made a huge difference to Aspen India's work. The founding and managing trustee of Aspen India, Mr. Tarun Das, who doesn't know about his capabilities? And if Aspen India is what it is because of him. Thank you, Dada. Before I invite Gopal, I'm going to invite a very young, a very enterprising lady to share some thoughts with us, Deepa Prahalad.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you for the first annual C.K. Prahalad Memorial Lecture. It means a great deal for all of us to have his contribution honored in this forum and to see aspects of my father's work being carried forward by many of you. I believe my brother and I have a far more daunting task in trying to be the inspiring parent he was to our own young children. It is my first time here in Kolkata, but few people know that my father spent a few months here early in his career with Union Carbide. It was his first time living away from home, and we grew up hearing stories about the city and legendary places like Fleury's. He even shared with us that this was the city where he made his first break with his conservative South Indian upbringing and sampled a beer for the first time. Throughout my father's life, the people and issues of India were never far from his mind and heart. It is a matter of pride for all of us that many of his ideas sparked debate and gained a wide following. However, during this visit, we have seen half of India quite literally and figuratively left powerless. And I am reminded of how much remains to be done. I would like to briefly reflect on my father's work and today's theme of innovation, myth, reality, and ideas with a focus on the Indian context. Let me begin with myth. I believe the hallmark of my father's work was challenging a commonly held myth that resources determine how innovative individuals and countries can be. His early work on strategic intent specifically focuses on how an organization's imagination and aspirations shape its destiny. In every forum, he challenged India to radically raise her aspirations. I think his faith in India can be seen in his admonition to India Inc., delivered more than a decade ago. A developing country is a state of mind and not a physical reality. Inefficiencies and dysfunctional behaviors, sheer lack of discipline, and disregard for productivity are not caused by resource constraints. They create resource constraints. All the icons of India today are proof that resource shortage is not an excuse for not creating world-class enterprises. I know that my father's immigrant experience and intellectual journey gave him the confidence that change and innovation was possible, but also the awareness that it can be painful. So he never lost his empathy for those who were struggling, whether it was managers or the poorest of the world. I also believe that his life experience gave all of his work a refreshing lack of presumption about where innovation can come from. This is clearly seen in his work at the bottom of the pyramid, where he argued that the poor represented a viable and profitable consumer market, and that the firms able to engage and co-create with them would ultimately become more competitive and innovative. This idea challenged corporate myths about the poor, but also urged business people to reimagine their roles as products and services for global markets are being created in poor countries. While finding the answers to poverty remains elusive, I believe he injected tremendous optimism and pragmatism into the debate, and in doing so, drew many of the world's best companies and minds to the issue. Second, reality. My father was determined to help India embrace her potential, but he knew that it would never happen without confronting some uncomfortable realities. While he helped many Indian companies innovate, he was equally concerned with governance and societal development. The gains from the first round of liberalization were profound. However, the data from India and other countries does not support the view that economic growth alone will resolve issues of corruption and social inequality. Growth, at best, is an enabler of social change. It is by no means a guarantor. What it may mean is that we have created a base of people who are hungry for change. In order for growth to create better outcomes for society at large, there needs to be governance in place that works. That is true in India as well as the United States, where the conduct of financial institutions grew more corrupt during periods of strong overall economic performance. Fairness rests on individuals, not financial standing. It was one of my father's greatest joys to see in India well on its journey to regaining her confidence, and that is why he turned his attention to helping awaken her conscience as well. He looked at corruption with fresh eyes, just as he had with poverty a few years prior. His urging to tackle this problem was not a condemnation, but a call to innovate and act. Whenever I forwarded him blogs and articles critical of his stance, some of them extremely harsh, he remained resolute. His response always came in the form of a question. Why would a country that was innovative enough to provide cell phone service for 1 cent a minute and world-class cataract surgery at the lowest cost in the world accept corruption as an intractable problem? He also refused to entertain the argument that India is where the West was at a similar stage in its development. While that may be true, the West never had 550 million people under the age of 25 to create a future for. My father loved India and believed in her potential, but he never believed that India would achieve prosperity unless it began to embrace meritocracy and fair play. I have been privy to many discussions about India's potential and desirability as an investment destination, and I certainly applaud the role of Indian. But no company makes money every year, and capital is fickle. Companies can be an engine of growth and raise aspirations, but but they cannot single-handedly deliver social justice. It is addressing these underlying issues of governance that I believe will spell out the difference between the societies that create opportunities and the ones that create and attract opportunists. I can also look back at our own family's experience. Our own relocation to the U.S. required extreme financial hardship and uncertainty in the early stages. But there was a single, intangible, and precious belief that made that bargain worthwhile: the belief that the system was fair. It's difficult to imagine that India, or indeed any other nation, can move forward without creating that shared belief. Ideas. I would like to close with ideas. The most important thing that I learned from my father's example is that innovation is not just about putting forth a set of ideas. It's about putting forth a set of ideals as well. I never saw him engage in hollow academic debates about whether business had an obligation to give back. He believed resolutely that work was a place where we went to put our values into practice, not into hiding, and that the purpose of organizations was to uplift people, not replace them. His willingness to help people was rooted in his deep optimism and belief that it is people who bring about change, not brilliant ideas alone. In remembering him, I hope management can move beyond a debate about whether we can do well and do good. Of course we can. If individuals struggle and succeed in doing so every day, we should demand no less of organizations. The more important question we need to answer is, how well are we doing good, and have a rigorous debate about how business can strengthen society. Creating an innovation culture is a complex task, and many new challenges will have to be answered along the way. As I look back at my father's work, though, all of his ideas began with a simple but wonderfully clarifying question: who would be better off because of this work? Having a personal stake made him impatient with ideas that seemed interesting to journals but had little impact on the ground. I also believe that this understanding was what sustained him during the inevitable challenges that arose. Because of his ideas and example, I am better off. I hope some of you in this room are better off. And nothing would make us happier than feeling that in India was in some way better off as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. That was exactly what we expected out of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I now turn to a man who I've grown to respect enormously over the years. A man who's led by action, a man who's led by thought, a man who inspires many of us, a man who's a shining example, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan.
I'd also like to thank Tarun, who has bestowed on me the honor of speaking at this first C.K. Prahalad Memorial Lecture. When he rang me up, it looked like some little informal event. But by the time things shaped up, I realized that this is a very big event. I congratulate Aspen for honoring a great son of India. The last time India produced a CK was back in the 30s. He was a great cricketer. And then it took 60 years for us to get another CK, in the form of C.K. Prahalad after C.K. Naidu. I hope it won't take another 60 years before the next CK comes along. There's something magical about the two alphabets CK. I got to know CK a little bit only about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I used to be in Bangalore. And I was helping Narayan Murthy and Jairaj to set up the National Management Convention, at which CK was one of the key speakers. Since then, we have met, discussed. When he wrote his book with Krishnan about co-creation, I happened to review it for the business world. And I produced an occasion for him to visit my home, and with a quaint mixture of whiskey and rasam, we reviewed my review. And this was a very nice, pleasant evening. And then, 6 months before he passed away, Gayatri and CK said they would come home for dinner. Then he rang me up on that Saturday morning and said, "I'm sorry we're not able to come. I'm not feeling very well." And to my great regret, that dinner never happened. Though I'm relieved to know from Gayatri that whatever was bothering him at that time was not linked to the unfortunate event that happened later. So CK was a wonderful inspiration for everybody, and therefore it's a special honor for me to be able to speak on a subject which I will allude to CK occasionally, but not to all his thoughts, because that's not the intention of the evening. What I've done for this evening is to choose 5 myths, 5 realities and 5 ideas. So I have 15 now to get through, and I've been told I'm going to shut up by 7 o'clock because it's Krishna Janmashtami. So with the name that I have, I must assume it's my birthday as well. We must recall that Lord Krishna expressed his manifestation, and he said, amongst the Daityas, I am Prahalad. So there's a great intimate connection between Prahalad and Krishna, which we know, of course, from the mythological stories. So to honor him, I will try to skip a few slides because I have prepared a lot. But if I skip a few slides, it's not because they are secret, but because I want to be able to finish on time. I hope you'll appreciate that. I have a gadget to move this in. Okay, it moves this way. There are 5 myths about innovation which I wish to touch upon. I'm not going to go into them in any great debate. First, that it is essential to be first in the market. There's a great infatuation that unless you're first in the market, you won't be innovative. Second is that managements measure innovativeness and take R&D, number of scientists, number of patents as a measure of innovation. And I'm arguing it's a myth. The third one is that innovation is more difficult in the service industry than the product industry. The fourth is that innovation is about taking a big bet. Unless you're going to land curiosity on Mars, it's not innovation. If you learn to cook dal faster, then somehow it seems a lesser. And even former home ministers who now become finance ministers refer to Jugaad as great infradig. I would like to eulogize Jugaad attribute. And the last, the process matters, discipline matters more than culture. So these are the 5 things. I'm going to really run through them very, very fast because I can't spend the whole evening just breaking down these myths, because these myths are so well established. And the fact that you have to be first in the market has been drilled into us. It's so deep in us that you'll even find it difficult to accept the point of view that I'm expressing. First mover has a great advantage. Who said it? Andrew Grove. First in the market allows you to patent it, not to be disputed. It is better to be first than better it is better to be first than better than the competition. Great advertising guru who said that. But in reality, people who have studied the history of innovation have said that you've forgotten the first guy who came in the market because he failed. So you remember the second or the third guy because he succeeded. What you remember is not who came first. What you remember is who survived. And I'm going to take 5 quick examples. Most of us won't remember these, but we may vaguely recognize it, those of us who are as grey-haired as I am, that yes, I have a vague recollection of having read this many years ago. If you ask who invented the personal computer, very often people will think it's Apple, think it's Marico in India, but actually it was Tata's. It was called Tata Coconut Oil that vanished somewhere down the line. So I want to dislodge, not eliminate, the myth that being first in the market is quite so all important. The second one is about R&D. You see international publications, magazines, they will all tell you how many scientists, and those become the measures of innovation. The pharma companies are renowned for spending so much money that they themselves don't know where it went. It has become, it's falling on its own weight. Booz Allen has done a study, and I've referenced that, which says there is absolutely no statistical relationship between financial results and R&D dollars. And if you take a very contemporary and innovative company, I think we'll have very little difficulty accepting that Apple is an innovative company. Their R&D spend is much less than their peers. So you start to wonder whether this is the measure of innovation. That leads to the question if it is not, what is? And we'll come to that when we come to the ideas. Then there's this feeling that services industry is very difficult to innovate. In products, you're delivering something physical. Actually, I came across, and I can't remember who I should attribute this to, but it is attributable. The second bullet here, it says that everybody who's offering a product or a service wants it to be magnetic to the consumer. And magnetism is a multiplication of functionality and emotion. It must be functionally different, it must appeal to your emotion, and somehow that combination must result in some uniqueness in your head. And it just so happens that products depend on functionality. I can make a better widget than you. That's functionality. But creating an emotional experience, which is the heart of the service industry, is a bit more fuzzy, it's soft. But there are many, many examples of people who have innovated in that industry. Because at the end of the day, as it says in the last bullet here, the emotion is equal to the customer experience multiplied by the employee engagement. How deeply are employees engaged? I think the whole subject of employee engagement and this role of innovation is an unexplored area. Unless your employee is deeply engaged with your company, where is he going to innovate? Where is going to be the atmosphere and culture for innovation? I'm going to take some well-known examples, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but the moment I say it, you'll see, yeah, I recognize that. Starbucks. At the end of the day, it's like a cup of coffee at MTR or ODP, right? Till they found the magical sweet spot. The point about employee engagement doesn't require me to give a lecture on employee engagement in HR. That would be ridiculous. But I've always wondered what makes the Taj so special. I should be forgiven if I take one or two Tata examples. I cannot talk about examples which I don't know about, and I can only talk about those that I know about. If they happen to be Tata, I'm not trying to promote my company. It's too big for a small guy like me to promote anyway. I've always wondered what makes people in the Taj so magically connected with what they do. What moves the emotion in a person when something happens to the Taj? And rather than talk about it, I want to play you a short video clip to break the monotony of my voice of an interview of something that all of you would recognize. I'm not presenting this because, you don't have to be in Tatas to feel emotionally moved by that sort of story. But I've had a personal experience. And we tend to react to things when something personally happens to you. I was not in Tatas. I was in Unilever. I was just another customer in the Taj in Bombay. I was attending a company conference. And I came back to my room at 11 o'clock. And as many of us do, I was brushing my teeth. And when my toothbrush fell down, I bent down to pick it up. And on my head on the way up hit the basin. I got a big gash on my back. It started a lot of blood flowing. I still got a bump on my head. I was actually scared. I'd never seen so much blood on myself. I just ran up to Taj, and I tell you, nothing to do with Tatas, by the way. I was just another customer. They sent people with me to the hospital, sat somebody outside my room, got me to the airport, actually dissuaded me from traveling the next morning. And here I've done it. And those were decisions taken by relatively ordinary people in the Taj. It didn't sort of get referred to the managing director, at least not at 12 o'clock in the night. I therefore came back to this feeling, what makes that employee get so engaged? And isn't that how innovation happens? And I use that little example to illustrate it. There are many other examples. Starbucks, if you read Joseph Michelini's book, you'll find many of them. The fourth myth is about big bets. Somehow we feel romanticized. Of course you should feel romanticized. If curiosity has landed on Mars, it is stunning. No question about it. If iPad 4 has come out, it is stunning. No question about it. But the whole world in its innovation is not about only big bets. The world runs on small bets. There's nothing wrong with small bets. And therefore, if you have employed a genius, then you take the big bet. Not everybody can do a nano. So you can't create a company where everybody is doing a big bet. Most of us would like to believe that we are the geniuses in the company, but regrettably that's not true, and it gets pretty clear as we work through our day. So I would argue that real life It's not just about the big bets, which only some very, very fine people can take. But it's a lot of small people taking small bets. And I think the car is a very good example of that from the service industry. And we all know how a small bet works. You go in a cycle of experimentation, you play around with it, you are immersed in it, you define it, you reorient it, and you go around in a circle. So when Edison said that I have not failed 10,000 times in making an electric bulb, I have just found 10,000 ways not to make it, it is very redolent of the day-to-day work that managers do in companies. And all the things that one has done and which look completely useless and ending up nowhere are all steps to a building of knowledge within that company, which makes that company what it is. The last point I want to make is this debate between process and culture, which is more important. Now, of course, both are important, and you could give it 50-50 and resolve the debate. But I was just talking with Deepa, and she said she's a student of design. Most of us tend to be students of engineering, accountancy, law. And we are very left-brained people. We tend to think in analytic terms. And the left brain is a very valuable brain. In fact, until 50 years ago, it was thought that that is the only useful brain. The right brain is like an addendum. You could do without the right brain. But latterly, a lot of studies in psychology have brought out that there are certain things the right brain does that the left brain does not do. Thinking spatially, design, aggregating rather than reducing. When you show a physicist an object, he wants to see what's in the object. He break it down to molecules, to atoms, to neutrons, to bosons, and so on and so forth. You show it to an artist, and he thinks of the totality. They are very different functions. And rather than give you a talk on this, our chairman made a very fine point, and I would like to, since I can't produce him physically, I would like to play you a statement that he made to us, which brings out this point about culture and process in a very subtle way. I would commend you to listen to that. Culture in an organization. It is not about just setting targets. Yes, you must set targets. 20% of my product should be new, I must have 100 patents. All that is not to be dismissed. How do you fundamentally change the way people think about their company and the work that they do? And if you take the view that you're hired as a manager because you can innovate, and if you're not innovating and you're an administrator, then are you doing your job? That produces a very different effect. I said I would spend 15 minutes on the myths. I would now go to the realities. I don't have 5 of them. What I've done in the first chart is to summarize, and I'll now touch upon a few ideas. You don't need me to point out that they are CK's ideas, but they will explain and talk for themselves as they go along. Some of the lessons that one has learned in Tata. The first is you must innovate holistically. The product innovation is not the one and only holy grail. And again, you'll see a reference here to the right brain way of thinking rather than purely the left brain way of thinking. There is a great management view that if you can't measure it, you'll never do it. But everything can't be measured, and everything you do cannot be measured. Try measuring the love you have for your wife, she'll never believe you. Anyway. If you say that I've improved in the index of my love for you from 3.6 when we got married, she'll say, well, I don't think it was even 3.6 at that time, but now it must be 0.6. So you can't measure everything. You have to express things, you have to think holistically. And that's what life's really about. But in the world of management, product development, innovation, a flood of people like myself, accountants, engineers, MBAs, fully left brain guys who have sort of suspended their right brain temporarily, are now operating. And I think there's a big lesson there. I have little doubt that if CK was there, he would have touched upon the subject sooner or later, because he was a person with a very holistic way of looking at things. The second is, you have to be first. If it's difficult to replicate, is it not an innovation? But we would never think of it that way. If you say, I have done this, and this is an innovation, there will be somebody sitting there saying, oh, but I have seen that. It was written about in that paper, it was done in some other country. But when you do something which is difficult to replicate, it's a huge innovation. If you want the lead that innovation gives you. My old company, Hindustan Deepa, developed a way within a period of 4 weeks to launch any consumer product in 20,000 villages all over the country. The distribution system of Hindustan Deepa was an innovation. There are many other such examples. I'm taking examples I'm familiar with. So this idea that innovation is also about difficult to replicate. And when I come to the bottom of the pyramid in a little while, you'll see that it's very difficult to replicate that. You try replicating and designing ab initio, the Dabba system of Bombay, you'll probably get a Nobel Prize for it. If you do a Six Sigma exercise and replicate, design it, I think you may have a good chance, if that's how you want to win a Nobel Prize. The third is develop and rely on culture and environment rather than only on processes. And I've alluded to that already. The fourth is drive a long-term agenda. Self-evident, but we get impatient. If it doesn't pass the stage gate, it's over and it's done with. The last point I want, and I will touch upon that a little bit more, is think biology, not physics. Biology is right brain, physics is left brain. I'm a slave of physics, but I wean myself away from physics to pick up biology. And here's why. Because there must be spontaneity in innovation. Just because you can't measure it, you can't dismiss it. Have you seen managers trying to innovate? Of course, plenty. People like us. Have you seen companies trying to innovate, win innovation awards? Yes. But have you seen a fish which is trying to swim? Fish just swim. Have you seen a bird that is trying to fly? Birds just fly. Have you seen flowers that are trying to flower? They just flower. And I think the role of managers, if you rewire your brain, you say, my job is just innovate, be spontaneous about it. You get a different outcome. And biology teaches you 4 lessons. It's a very complicated looking chart, but that is to give you a sense of a scientific approach to it. But biology tells you that you need permeable boundaries. It is through the walls of the cell that interactions and changes happen. The organisms in the system must be aligned. There are very few critical rules in biology. How genes mutate is something that is constantly changing. And it has a very flexible architecture, exactly the opposite of what a mechanical engineer would design for. And I think there are lots of lessons in this. And I will take only one example, not illustrate all of it, again in the interest of time, but I think you connect the messages about biology. And so you come to this, that all innovations solve some problem somewhere. And here I come squarely into what Prahalad became so famous. He became famous for many things, his core competency. He subsequently came to the bottom of the pyramid, and then he came with the co-creation. And he managed to put all this together into some heady mixture, which seemed very easy to understand, but very difficult to implement. And he worked with many of us in helping us to try to do it. So the left side you have a circle, which says somebody has a deeply felt need. It may be explicit and expressed, and you can therefore measure it through market research. Or it is implicit and not expressed. Nobody tells you I want a car for $2,000. Nobody will tell you I want an iPad which I can walk around. Nobody will tell you I want a cell phone. So you have 2 varieties there. And on the right side you have somebody with an effective solution, which means it is affordable or it's value-led. And affordable and value-led doesn't mean cheap. I've deliberately, as Prahalad always would say, it is not a question of making a cheap product. But usually it's difficult to replicate. You may make it difficult to replicate by having a patent around it and preventing other people from this model that you created. Makes it difficult for somebody else to understand. People still taking apart many at the bottom of the pyramid and say, how do I replicate this? I told you the example of the Bombay Dabbawalas. And I think that constitutes what I call a new and innovative approach. So I've taken the famous pyramid of Prahalad and twisted it a little bit, and I don't think you would disapprove of this use of this pyramid, by creating 3 triangles which are one beside the other. The left triangle tells you what is the type of innovation. And the top end of the triangle shows you the ones that are technology-led, product-based, they're first in the world, they're famous, they win all the awards, they are well-known. iPod, iPad, all those things that Silicon Valley bugs bite you with as soon as you landed in California. Very, very valuable. But if I take you horizontally and say, what is this level of visibility, which is the second triangle, is very high. Everybody knows about it. And if I take you to the third one, its societal impact, it is very good, but it's for the haves. You know, 500 million people in the world, out of 7 billion, are the haves. They can afford an iPad and an iPod. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. But then you come to the lower half and go horizontally, you have another type of innovation which is value-led, which is business model-based. It's perhaps a bit difficult to replicate. And Arvind Eye Care, there are many examples in our country and all of us know them, I don't need to list them for you. The visibility is low. If you didn't have Harvard Business School coming and writing a case study on the Bombay Dabbawala system, or the Prince Philip coming and inviting them to visit England, none of us would know about it. And imagine if they didn't have Six Sigma, delivery of the right lungs from the right wife to the right husband, the divorce rate in Bombay would be much higher. So, it's a huge societal impact. So if you move across to the right, a lot of people whom you might call have-nots, and you suddenly say, those are also human beings. And this was the humanity that Prahalad often preached and wrote about in his books, which Deepa referred to. I'm going to use just 2 slides to talk about a subject which we all know exists and with which we in Tatas have had a little experience. Waterborne disease. By the way, I must tell you this. When we were developing this, I invited CK to come and spend a Sunday morning just to have the first time to brainstorm. He's very fond of this sandbag approach. And as my colleagues were presenting, somewhere in the middle, he said, stop, stop. I said, on Sunday morning, and CK shouted, stop, stop. What has he said wrong? He said, beyond this, don't tell me anything more. Because I have a conflict of interest. I'm on the board of Hindustan Lever, who are also in the water purification business. I did not know what subject you were declaring. Stop. So he demonstrated in a practical way his sense of peace. I've listened to you. I don't think, if you tell me more than this, it will be private information and I should not hear it. He himself told us to stop. And I appreciated that very much. It was a very good lesson that he left us with. So, we all know there's a big water problem. If you don't believe me, you can read this problem. But I think it would be wise not to do so. We all know. The most dramatic statement here, embedded in all this, is more than half the hospital beds in the world are filled with people who are suffering from waterborne disease. If you solve a waterborne disease, you could reduce the healthcare beds by half. Dr. Reddy may not like this, but I think it's not bad for humanity. And so, encouraged by the thought that we do this, Tata has developed a product. And I'm not going to go through the story of how this product was developed and so on. But I'm trying to bring together the strands of thought that people like CK inspire, which you have to sell enough of to make money, and until then you have to invest in it, and made a product which is made out of rice husk. So everywhere in India you get rice husk. And you impregnate it with nanoparticles of silver. And you've done some things, and all the details go. I'm going to show you another video clip, because it's got some very nice Irish music. So if you don't like the video, you'll at least like the music. But I think the video tells you in 2 minutes all the nice things that it does. But more importantly, it tells you how this bottom of the pyramid thing comes alive. And I think that's the point I'm trying to illustrate, rather than to say, Tata did a very clever thing. Something mankind has never heard of. They're just putting good common sense together, which again, I think is very typical of what CK did. CK's ability to put together different ideas from different fields into a new stream was something that made him magnificent, and most of us like to talk to him for that reason. And these ideas are not mine either, so I'll just put them forward. Sorry, just a moment. I just want to say that the first point I want to make is, let us neither praise jugaad nor denigrate it, but just accept it as something that's there. Now, we have lots of books coming out. some of which I also write a few words of introduction or forward for. There's a whole camp which thinks Jugaad is a bad thing. There's a whole camp which thinks Jugaad is a great thing. It's very Indian. And there's a lot of in-between people who are trying to figure out who's right. Have you thought of the fact that in the world, I speak 5 Indian languages with a reasonable familiarity. There is no word for innovation. In Bengali, in Hindi, in Tamil, there is no word for innovation. You can coin a word which nobody uses in normal language. You know, Naveenta. You don't go around saying, "Aada, aapke company mein Naveenta kya ho raha hai?" I'm not going to really speak that. And I've tried it in Tamil, I've tried it in Bengali, I've tried it in Telugu. It doesn't work. Innovation doesn't happen. Innovation is something, and I think that comes the context of the language and the context of the culture. If there's a problem, solve it. And that's how probably this word Jugaad came. I don't know if Jugaad is a Hindi word or an Urdu word or a Punjabi word. Everybody is disowning it nowadays. But Jugaad is the essence of human progress. And I think it's neither to be put on a pedestal nor to be dumped into the dustbin. And that debate should be put to an end. I was very interested. I went to Brazil and they use the word Gambiara. And I kept saying Gambiara, Gambiara. I said, what the hell does this word mean? And they said there is no English word for it. And after a lot of gesticulation with the hand, it means innovation. I went to China. They got a very, very Chinese word for it, which I hope I pronounced right. It's called Xiju Chongqin. Looks like the next new president of China. Xiju Chongqin. And I asked them, what the hell does that mean? And they again went round and round, and it turned out that they mean innovation. Even in the software industry, there are people here. You use the word, he clutched it. In German, you would say Kluge, K-L-U-G-E. What does Kluge mean? Kluge means doing a patchwork and solving a software problem. And now that's seen as a virtue in the software industry. Oh, he clutched it, or Kluge it, depending on how you pronounce it. So I say that if it solves a problem, if it does something for you, use it. Remember, the year 1966 was a great year in terms of exporting Indian ideas. That is the year Ravi Shankar went and spent time with the beaches. Before that, the sitar was not quite known. Right? That is the year Yoga Guru B.K. Iyengar went and taught some Hollywood stars about yoga. That is the year M.S. Subbulakshmi was invited to the United Nations to come and sing Carnatic music, which had never gone global. It had gone, probably not gone north of Chennai. And suddenly, today you see, 40 years later, whether it's Carnatic music, sitar, yoga, and many other things that we can all take pride in, have become global. So what happens to the idea is more important than what you call it. I found a very interesting, George Orwell said that the English are not happy unless they are miserable, which I think is quite true. He said the Irish are not at peace unless they are at war. He said the Scots are not at home unless they are abroad. And I have also coined 3 things. The Tamils are not quiet unless they are talking. The Bengalis are not calm unless they are restless. And the Gujaratis are easy to employ so long as they employ themselves. This inherent, spontaneous feeling that we have is a virtue to be cultivated. It may become like yoga and like Carnatic music and like all these other things, a hallmark of Indian innovation. I want to show you something which we all regard as one of the greatest innovations. If I tell you Apollo 13, or even what has happened day before yesterday. But there was a particular episode in the Apollo mission when the carbon dioxide that was being exhaled by the astronauts was going to poison the atmosphere, and therefore the astronauts would die with their own exhalations, and they have to fix it. It's become very famous now because when Mission Control was talking to them, he said, "Houston, we have a problem," and that Houston, we have a problem has been. If you don't mind, I'm going to this remade of the film, and this is probably the last film I'm showing, but I think it breaks the monotony. How Jugaad was done, and it's taken as a very great. So I think that's a very nice lesson. I've talked earlier about culture. The second idea is about mindset. Mindset is what creates innovation. And there's a very famous professor at Stanford called Carol Dweck. I'm not going to play her video in the interest of time. If you get time, go on to the YouTube and watch what she said. She said we all have two types of mindsets, fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset says, I'm good at this, let me do more and more of this. And if something doesn't work, then you get angry. John McEnroe was a fine tennis player. But when things didn't go his way, he hit his racket in the ground, he shouted at the linesman, he shouted at the umpire. That was a reflection of a fixed mindset. Other players, like Federer, say it's not working today, let me try something else. They come with a growth mindset. And Carol Dweck tells you about how to build these two competencies in a company. I'll skip the Carol Dweck video. We should give up this idea that innovation is all product-led. And unless we can see the product and physically touch it and its functionality, we can't relate it to innovation. India has made a great virtue, without actually planning to do so, of business model-led innovation. Our distribution systems, our medical care. Even America doesn't have electronic voting machines. You are using electronic voting machines all over this country. It goes on the backs of elephants and rhinoceroses so that everybody can vote. Where in the world you have 3 million legislators elected every 5 years? Except in India. But we don't think of that as innovation. We'll actually blame the election commission, saying what a lousy bunch of guys they are. 3 million. If you add the panchayat elections, the district elections, the assembly elections, state elections, 3 million. I said this once in Geneva and they said, but that's half the population of our country. I said, yes, that's the number of people who get elected every 5 years. So there's always an election going on in India. It's a business model innovation. It's a different matter that Mr. Shinde thinks he has been a very fine power minister. But he must be having his own business model in his mind. I want to take my last example of saying how what you regard as innovation and what you don't regard as innovation is a product of your own mindset. I went to an advanced management program, and this must be 30 years ago. There was a 4-part case study on Benetton. So how Benetton, which is a fantastic company, at least at that time, used to cut the parts of the fabric, give it away to women, and they would stitch it up and come back with components, and this would be assembled. And all that they did was the branding and the safety plan. And when I joined Tata's, I found that they had the world's largest packaged salt brand, Tata Salt. So I said, how did, anybody would give us left arm to create the world's largest packaged anything brand? How did you do it? Everybody had just done it. They told me the story. And again, I'm not going to go into a long story, but at close to touching 1 million tons, there's no other brand in the world which is as big as the Tata Salt brand. Nobody thinks of it as an innovation. But salt is something that was launched in 1983. It's gone through various avatars. But it's a very emotional subject. Salt is a part of your language. You say namak haram, and I want to tell you how emotional salt can be. Colleagues, do you realize you were the first to introduce iodized salt in this country in 1983? Were you the first to brand salt and promote the nutritional benefits of iodization? And you were the first to develop a completely outsourced model. The packaging, the invoicing, the logistics. And you created the world's largest packaged salt brand. You say, yeah, nothing that you said is new to me, but when you put it that way, it does look like perhaps it's an innovation. And so I would like to conclude by saying innovation is about your mindset, and there's a deep cultural basis on which Indians are innovating. And we are in the process of discovering our own model of innovation. And I think that is our greatest strength. It is to that truth that Prahalad spoke constantly. He did not want to be seen in a global context as an India-Philly guy, India-file, so he probably spoke a bit more generally. And I'm closing with this slide of the structure of Tatas. People wonder how Tatas work. We also wonder sometimes. And most people would draw Tata structure in this way. The Tata sons at the top, there are some trusts, and then there are the sons, grandsons, great-grandsons. And then people ask the question, Americans particularly, business people, how does the attention of Tata sons ever reach that level for the grandson or the great-grandson? So I said, no, it doesn't reach him. He said, then how do you run your companies? I said, good question. And I just said, this is the way Tata runs. It's the other way around. Tata trusts are at the bottom, and at the roots of the tree, it nurtures the values. Tatas are like a football game. The rules say what you cannot do. It doesn't tell you what you should do. It's exactly the opposite of most corporations. In most corporations, there are manuals and processes that tell you what you can do. Tatas tells you what you cannot do. So everything else you can do. In football, you can touch the ball with any part of your anatomy, including those that cause you life-threatening danger, if you choose to. You can't use only these two parts of your hand. Use your head, use your foot. That's why football is the world's largest watched game. And so by inventing a model, which I think is an innovation, how do you manage an conglomerate like this in a different way? May not last forever, but that's the way Tatas are managed. I said this is another part of the genius, and there are many examples. I should be forgiven for having used Tata examples, but I cannot talk about RPT or somebody else, because I don't have the intimate knowledge. But they exist everywhere, believe me. It's a question of whether we are willing to look for it. As it happens in science, the great discoveries happen, not because man has become smarter, but because the tools through which you can identify them have become smarter. The boson has been there since Jesus Christ walked on this earth. But our tools to detect the boson have improved. And so it is with innovation. I see a great future for the Indian way of innovation based on our own cultural norms. And I hope Prahlad's inspiration will always stay with us. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Very inspiring, very rich in content, very rich in thought presentation. And I'd like to open the floor for questions. We have a few minutes. Yes.
Sir, my name is Aspen. It was very interesting when you were talking about the Bombay Tapa Aspen. When I remember when we came to our college, Samaj Pune, there was one thing, 6 Sigma between Maka. You were advocating that by best of my understanding, you never used an ideology called 6 Sigma.
Sorry, there was so much noise, I don't know the question.
When we heard the Baba, he said that he never used a concept called 6 Sigma. That there were no 6 Sigma markets in that's what he's talking about. Okay? And it's just that you, perhaps I may have misunderstood your concept that he actually used the concept of 6 Sigma, but when he came and gave a lecture in our college, he never advocated that he even knows anything about ABC about 6 Sigma.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to, if I've given you the impression that he designed it for 6 Sigma, I was saying exactly the opposite.
Okay.
They designed it, and then somebody came and told him 6 Sigma. He said, "Ye cheez kya ho?"
Absolutely.
Should I turn to a very young lady sitting here? Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
It's so simple that the way the technique develops, nature and so on. But when we hear about Steve Jobs, he was smiling and he was big and he was trying to do all those kinds of things with his people. Was it the right way? Or the way you have described, naturally coming from the people? I was just wondering, trying to equate the two.
I have a very pragmatic answer. I'm not a philosopher. There are many ways to reach God. And there's no point debating which is the better way. And same with innovation. Steve Jobs has done it. It works very well for him. Wonderful. Clap hands, read his book, be inspired. But you have to do what is spontaneous to you. That's the limited point I'm making. And never worry. Just like if you go to the temple, you don't worry whether it should have been better off going to the mosque. You'll be a very confused person if you spend your life there. But if you listen to the wrong guys, you'll have that question coming to your mind. But thank God you don't listen. Yes, sir.
So, Justice, ignorant of what you said, sir, but there is only a word in Bengali for innovation, which is called Obi novel.
Sorry.
There is a word in Bengali for innovation. He said that there is no word in Bengali for innovation. That is called Obi novel. Obi novel means something innovative.
Maybe it will work.
There is a general impression that our social structure in India, very rigid caste-based social structure kind of has inhibited innovation, and it's also prevented us from questioning our seniors or asking the right kind of questions. So I think questioning is very much a part of creating an environment of innovation. We have to comments.
It may be true, it may not be true. I can set up a debate, I will argue on both sides. But so what? You still have problems to solve. Somebody has to make money out of it. In every society, they have exactly the same debate. I have worked in an international company. Believe me, I worked in India. My colleague Manoj here will confirm this. I have worked in Africa, I have worked in Europe, I have seen American colleagues. Each of them thinks that in his country, he has all these same problems. I met a Chinese entrepreneur, an American Chinese, who had just gone to Beijing, Shanghai, was in Bombay on his way back to California. He's an American Chinese who lives in. And I asked him the usual question: if somebody's come from China, you ask him China, India, something. And since he was a venture capitalist, early stage, I said innovation. He said, you guys don't know how lucky you are. So I said, tell me why. He said, you need 5 C's to be innovative. Chaos. There are lots of it. And that's a great spur to innovation. You need creativity, you need conversation. He says in China they just can't jump up and do what they feel like. Here everybody seems entitled to do so. So he went through a certain logic. It actually put India on a pedestal. He said, you guys don't know, you are so much better off than China. You will be the leaders of innovation. The limited point I want to make therefore is that this is a matter of your mindset. And if you're not willing, if you're willing to jettison these old ideas that it's our schooling system, it's our parents, it's our grandparents, and our ancestors, and our mythology, then you're nobody to blame but yourself. You get a completely different outcome. And that was the limited point.
So with your permission, since I have the microphone, I just thank you, Gopal
It's the
sir.
power of conversation. You got the microphone. So
Thank you, Gopal sir. Just one thought from your end, which I would like to understand as far as the culture part is concerned, which is one aspect as far as myth, reality, and an idea is concerned, as far as the work culture in Bengal, as far as that is concerned. Can I have one each? Thank you so much.
if you want to know what is the myth about Bengal, what is
The work culture, yes.
What
Work
is the
culture,
reality about Bengal?
according to you. According to you.
I'm not going to answer your question. Because I have a conflict of interest. I'm a Bengali. I'm born and raised here. And therefore I'm probably more Bengali than many others.
Try and make an
apply my
question.
mind because I have been beaten up by one side or the other. Depending on what I say. I told you the Bengalis cannot rest until they are restless. So I'll pass that.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for a very stimulating lecture. The question that I wanted to ask is that there is enough literature and research that is done on innovative companies, how companies innovate or how an individual person innovates. Is there any research done on how governments innovate? Or is there a different way of doing it? Like say we have this Aadhaar coming up, is that an innovation? Or is there any research which is published on how governments innovate and which others can take note from? If you could also share some examples.
I'm sure there is. It's not a subject I've studied, but it's not only Aadhaar. I refer to our election system. I think it's a huge thing. And for us, we don't recognize. If I come and tell you the Indian election system is an innovation, most people will say this one was gone a bit banana. But actually it is. There are many things in our public arena which are huge innovations. And I'm sure there's a mass of literature, but since I haven't studied it, I shall not answer your question.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to ask one question. I just have a very quick question, sir. My voice is loud enough. You talked about spontaneity in innovation. My question is, do you think innovation is a skill or is it a talent? Can innovation be taught or is it inherent?
My current view is that it can be taught. There are very few things. And the beauty about the way I look at it is good character, living with good principles, honesty, ethics, innovation. These are all difficult to teach. And the way to teach them, as we have learned, all of us, is you tell stories. Who taught you to be a good citizen? Who taught you not to lie, assuming they succeed? Your grandmother sat you on her lap and told you some story. Your mother, uncle, aunt told you a story. And therefore I believe innovation is transmitted through examples, through stories, and through changing mindsets. Now that's easy to say. I'm no expert on the subject. And I would say to Prahlad's credit, being his memorial speech for our strength acknowledge this, that he tried this persistently for 15 years. He wrote his core competence book, if my memory is right, in 92 or thereabouts, 91. And I think his Bottom of the Pyramid book finally came out in 2002 or something. But he wrote his HBR article about 5 years before that, which I see. So these things take a lot of time. Our society is changing. And I don't think it's a natural talent. It can be for some people. I'm not saying there is no natural talent. But you can have to be concerned with what you can add on. You know, it's like luck. I always say there are two kinds of luck. There's the good luck that you have prepared yourself to deserve. So, Saina Nehwal practiced hard and Pulel Argopinchal taught her. She deserved the luck she gave. But there's an unearned luck also. And when she came to the losing semi-final match with the Chinese girl retired out. And what did her father say in Hyderabad? He said, I went to Tirupati. It's very Indian. When it comes to innovation, you go to Tirupati. He said, I went to Tirupati and offered laddus. And I said, let my daughter win. And the gods have listened to me by injuring the Chinese girl. That's a bit of luck. So we are all recipients of these, and sometimes it's bad luck or good luck. But we cannot do anything about things that we have learned. We can only plan for what we can.
I have a question.
I have the mic now. My question is about innovation and scale. There is the stereotype of innovation coming out of garages. It's Microsoft. You mentioned several times the idea of jugaad, jalandhar, spontaneity, culture. So the question is, do large organizations inherently inhibit innovation? Do we necessarily have to look at the small operations to get the first into the market, the first idea into the market, and then let large organizations come in make a success out of it?
I think you got a valid point there. Small, uninhibited companies can think out of the box because they can do that small bets very well. That cycle of small bets that I had. It's a very nice book by Peter Sims. I would recommend you to read it. Or how you can take small bets. But to take a small bet in a large company might provide some constraints. So in fact, quite often it happens that somebody gets an idea but is not able to develop it further at a large company next step. For example, the famous case about the wiper. You know, the guy who invented it fought a case against Ford for 20 years, but finally all the large companies even made it happen. So I think there's a point.
I have a question. This is a very simple question. I am very new to the whole corporate world. I've never worked in the corporate world. I have only got contacts like you and listened to the guy's lecture. This was one of the best lectures I have heard, which I could understand. My question is, I learned a lot about innovation, culture, mixed reality ideas, or whatever you spoke. I would like you, vis-a-vis the Bawala example that you gave us, I would like to ask you whether within all these 5 elements and the 3 mixed reality ideas you have put on, wouldn't the housewife across the board in India or anywhere else be the best innovator, make the best of the minimum resources at any given point of time? Would you or would you not agree with this?
You know, you asked a very interesting question. My answer is yes. I hope you tell my wife I said this. But women, this is biology, have a connection between the left and the right brain. There's a doctor here who will confirm what I say. But I state the truth. It's a gadget called the corpus callosum. It's a broad band of thin wires, metaphorically speaking, which connects the left and the right brain. And the ability of women to exchange information between the left and the right brain, I think is better than men. And that is why men like to do one thing at a time. And women try to do everything at the same time. Now we will decide who's superior. That's a separate question.
Sir, today most well-managed companies, in fact all well-managed companies, you have the system of KRAs being set for the managing director and then percolating down to the lowest officer. You have this balanced scorecard, you have the PMS system, etc. Now this kind of system is okay, but I would like your comment on that for graded small kind of improvements, similar to ISO, similar is business excellence. But innovation will not come out of that. Hotmail you won't be able to create through ISO, business excellence, KRAs, etc. To do that, you have to have an atmosphere without fear. You have to be able to accept 10 failures and 1 success, or 100 failures and one success. What is your reaction to that?
No, I have no reaction in the sense it's a point of view, and I can accept that. But I would still argue that so long as the locus of your thinking is placed outside your mind, you will continue to have these questions. Who wrote that you have to create a hotmail? Who wrote that you have to have a big innovation? Innovation is like breathing. If somebody asks you, do you know how to breathe? You will say, yes, of course I know how to breathe. Otherwise, how do you think I'm alive? But if I take you to B.K. Saega or a less controversial person like Baba Ramdev, he will prove to you in a very short time that you don't know how to breathe. And the argument that I have in my mind is it doesn't matter what the world outside is doing. What can I do to my mind in small, big? You know, many innovations look very small when they are made, but they become huge with the passage of time. And I'll give you an example. This country has $100 billion, or I hope I'm not wrong in the number, $80 billion worth of software. Who invented the offshore delivery model? It was TCS. TCS back in 1968 said, when America is awake and I be sleeping, and the other way around, and started to deliver and develop systems, which was extremely well progressed with many other very distinguished companies, like the Infosys and Wipro and so on. And that never was seen as an innovation until an unearned luck came to you called Y2K. Suddenly in 1997, when I joined Tata's, TCS was somewhere, in the list of companies below steel and motors and so on. You had to look for it. It was somewhere in its numbers. Today it's sitting there and you have to look for the other ones. So, innovation that happens may not be recognized immediately as innovation. And sometimes, suddenly after a period of time, something happens and that causes it to break into a new effulgence. And then you say, that's great. So my argument would simply, my response to you would simply be, if you regard your fundamental reason why you're paid your salary, or your reason for existence as innovative, and not worry whether it's big or small, whether mankind will remember it or not remember it, I think you start to see the subject in a slightly different. Just like a person who's 50 years of age, who thinks he knows how to read, can suddenly have his whole life changed by attending a yoga.
Well, I think there will be many more questions to be asked, but in the interest of time, I think we must conclude this session. Can I ask Mr. Rajiv Paul to thank our chief guest?
Sanjeev, friends, Gopal, it's been great to have you here. I think Professor Prahalad, who I've had the privilege of knowing for the last several years, thanks to SLAM and my connections there, would have been proud to have you because he was an inspirational teacher. To a very large extent, you've been that today. He's been a great thinker, and many of your thoughts were very great. And above all, he was an outstanding visionary. And I think, in a way, you have taught many of us today how really to have a vision and how to, through your 3 points, where you 5 examples in each, right from the myths to realities to ideas, how to link the 3 together. And I think, friends, he's done a fantastic job. So let me first of all ask all of you to put your hands together and give him a big applause. Let me tell you on 3 occasions, a pretty girl sitting right behind me, Kiran Prasricha, who of course was instrumental in getting this event together, whispered, my God, I've never heard it before, he's truly outstanding. 3 times he said that. So I think, I think we are all in that. And when a pretty girl says that, it's always true. And I was never taught by my father. My grandmother and my mother taught me. They told me the stories. So obviously I'm not allowed. Quote you unquote. Sanjeev, thank you so much for sharing this. Although I know you're kind of more Aspen than I am, but thank you for spending your time. I know Janmashtami is a kind of a very important family occasion for you, and I know you have to rush to a puja, but thank you for sharing this session. In fact, I'd like to dwell on Mr. C.K. Prahalad. C.K. He was a person who I met perhaps on 6 occasions, and more than meeting him, I heard him speak, and he spoke from his heart. But he was very, very clear in his thinking, and he motivated all of us, and when I say all of us, I'm wearing my CII hat now, and he brought out the best in us. He got a mass movement which is very much on. He's not here with us today in person, but his idea, his thinking, is very, very well imbibed in us, and for many of those who are not aware, he had this vision, India, 75. And India on its 75th whatever day of our independence or from independence, a big vision of having India really a country which is vibrant and a country which is respected for the values that he had, including integrity. You gave the example, Gopal, about when you were talking about the disease problem, waterborne diseases, and how he said stop. That's just a simple thing. But he had strong values. And I had incidentally the pleasure of listening to him at IIM Ahmedabad. And that was a truly inspirational address. And I think just when people were getting out after graduating from IIM Ahmedabad, the leaders, they were going in, hopefully, to improve India phenomenally. Not just make good money for themselves, but to uplift India out of whatever needs to be uplifted of the 450 million unfortunate people we have. Well, he's not physically with us today. His ideas is, his vision is, his spirit is. But I'm very happy that you, Mr. Prahalad, are with us, and you, Deepa, are with us this evening. It's really nice. I think he'd be happy he's up there, and I think he's very happy seeing both of you with all of us. And Tarun, thank you very much. You have been my friend, you've been my philosopher and guide for certainly 2 years when I was at CII kind of full time. And thank you for making this happen. Sanjeev, I have 2 tasks to request. One is of you and one is of a few others. First, let's finish this first one. On behalf of Aspen, may I request you to give a token of appreciation to Gopal. Thank you, and may I request Mrs. Prahalad, Deepa, to come on stage, and may I request Tarun and Kiran also to come on stage. I think that we will have the full team which has put all this together, made all this happen. We've had an outstanding beginning to this lecture, series of lectures that we'll have, and I do hope, and I'm sure this will be an annual event, and we look forward to this happening. But friends, I would just like all of you to get up for a moment, think of CK, let's salute his ideas, let's salute his vision, and let's pay respect and let us carry his spirit in India forward today and forever. Put your hands together and let's salute him now. Thank you, Ram. Thank you all. Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, Mr. Prahalad. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you very much.